Here's something nobody told you when you signed your first loan document. The bank wasn't doing you a favor. They were opening a position on you. Think about that for a second. When a bank approves your mortgage, your car loan, your student debt, they are not a charity extending a helping hand to a hardworking person. They are an investment firm that just found a client willing to pay them guaranteed returns for the next 30 years. You signed a contract that turned your future income into their asset. And the wildest part, you went home and celebrated. Now, I'm not saying debt is automatically the enemy. That would be too simple, and frankly, that kind of surface-level advice is exactly what keeps the middle class running on a financial treadmill, moving fast and going nowhere. What I am saying is that the question, should I invest or pay off my debt first, is one of the most loaded questions in personal finance, and the answer the wealthy use is almost never the one being circulated in personal finance Reddit threads or handed out by the guy at your bank with the laminated brochure. Most people approach this question like it's a coin flip. Pay off debt feels safe. Investing feels exciting. Pick one, hope for the best, repeat until retirement. But that is not a strategy. That is financial improvisation. And when you're improvising with money in a system specifically engineered to extract wealth from people who don't understand its rules, you are not playing a game. You are being played. My name is Steve, and I study how money actually moves. Not the version taught in schools, not the version your employer's HR department hands you in a PDF, but the version that shows up when you trace where wealth actually accumulates and why it keeps moving away from the people working hardest to build it. If that kind of uncomfortable clarity is what you're here for, you're in the right place. Now, before we get into the mechanics of this decision, and I'm going to give you a framework you can apply to your exact situation tonight, I need to plant a seed in your mind that I'm going to come back to later. There is a specific type of debt that the wealthiest people in America not only refuse to pay off early, but actively want more of. I'll tell you exactly what it is and why, but only after we establish the foundation. Because if I tell you now without the context, it sounds like financial recklessness. With the context, it sounds like what it actually is, which is strategy. Let's start with the math, because the math is real even when it's uncomfortable. When you carry a debt at 7% interest and you pay it off, you have just earned a guaranteed risk-free 7% return on that money. Read that sentence again. Guaranteed risk-free. There is no ETF, no index fund, no diversified portfolio on the planet that can promise you a guaranteed 7% return. The S&P 500 has averaged roughly 10% annually over the last century, but that average is built on years where it returned 28% and years where it evaporated 34% of your portfolio before breakfast. The average is real. The smooth ride is a myth. So here's where the first uncomfortable truth lands. For a significant portion of the population, paying off debt is the highest returning investment available to them. Not because investing is bad, because the guaranteed nature of the return changes the risk-adjusted math entirely. A 7% guaranteed return beats a 10% potential return once you factor in the volatility, the psychological cost of watching your portfolio crater during a recession, and the very human tendency to panic sell at exactly the wrong moment. But, and this is a large but, that logic only holds up to a certain interest rate threshold. Below that threshold, the math flips, and understanding exactly where that threshold sits for your specific debts is the difference between building wealth strategically and paying off the wrong debts for the wrong reasons while opportunity cost silently bleeds your future dry. Here is what the threshold looks like in practice. Take two people, Rachel and Derek. Both 32 years old, both earning similar incomes, both with a spare $500 a month they're trying to deploy intelligently. Rachel has a credit card balance sitting at 24% interest. She also has a federal student loan at 4.5%. She decides to split her extra money evenly between both debts. Feels balanced, right? Feels responsible. The problem is that while she's putting money toward that 4.5% loan, that 24% balance is compounding against her daily. Every month she delays attacking that 24% balance costs her more than the satisfaction of making progress on the lower rate debt. She's being financially tidy while being mathematically destroyed. Derek has the same setup, but Derek attacks the 24% balance first, minimum payments on everything else until that card is gone. Then he redirects everything, the freed-up payment plus his extra cash, into either investments or the lower-rate debt, depending on what the market looks like. That sequencing, that ruthless prioritization by interest rate, is worth thousands of dollars in saved interest and potentially tens of thousands in recovered investment opportunity. This is called the debt avalanche. It's not a new concept, but most people don't execute it because it doesn't feel satisfying. Paying off a small balance feels like winning. Paying down a large, high-interest balance for months before it's gone feels like grinding. Our brains are wired to prefer small, immediate wins over large, delayed ones, which is, not coincidentally, the same psychological mechanism that made that 24% credit card feel manageable when you signed up for it. The credit card industry spent billions of dollars in research understanding exactly how human psychology responds to rewards, minimum payments, and the illusion of control. The cashback rewards, the airline miles, the sleek metal card that feels different in your hand, none of that is generosity. That is acquisition cost. They spent money acquiring you as a client because they modeled out exactly how much interest you would pay over your lifetime and decided you were worth the investment. You are a revenue stream. The question is whether you're going to keep paying into theirs or start building your own. Now, before I give you the framework for deciding whether to invest or pay off debt in your specific situation, I want to stop here for a second. If what I'm saying is landing for you, if you're watching this and thinking about your own balances, your own interest rates, your own financial decisions you wish someone had explained differently, hit subscribe and drop a comment below. Tell me what your actual financial situation looks like right now. Are you carrying high-interest debt while watching everyone on the internet talk about investing? Are you paying off debt aggressively but wondering if you're missing market gains? Tell me where you're at. This channel exists for that exact conversation, and I read every comment. Back to the framework. Here is the decision tree the wealthy actually use, not as a rigid rule, but as a thinking structure. First, before you pay a single extra dollar of debt or invest a single dollar, you need a cash buffer. 3 months of actual expenses, not income, expenses, sitting somewhere liquid and boring, not invested, not deployed, just sitting there. The reason for this is not conventional wisdom. The reason is that without a buffer, any financial shock, a job loss, a medical bill, a car that decides to quit on a Tuesday, forces you to either liquidate investments at the worst possible time or reach back for more debt. Your beautiful debt payoff plan has a single point of failure, and it's life itself. The buffer is not laziness, it is infrastructure. Second, if your employer offers any form of 401k match, capture it before you do anything else. This is the only context where ignoring high-interest debt temporarily makes rational sense. If your employer matches 50% of your contributions up to a certain percentage of your salary, walking away from that match to pay off a 15% credit card is still leaving money on the table. The match is an immediate 50% return on the matched portion. No debt interest rate beats an immediate 50% return. Take the match first, always, then redirect the full force of your capital toward high-interest debt. Third, and this is where the sequencing gets tactical, rank every debt you carry by interest rate, not by balance size, not by which one feels most emotionally heavy, by rate. Draw a line at roughly 6 to 7%. Everything above that line gets paid off aggressively before serious investing begins. Everything below that line is what I'd call patient debt. And here is where we return to the thing I asked you to hold earlier. Low-interest, fixed-rate debt held strategically while deploying capital into appreciating assets is not a mistake, it is leverage. And leverage, used intelligently with appropriate risk management, is how wealth compounds faster than income alone can build it. A mortgage at 4.5% fixed on a property that appreciates 6 to 8% annually and generates rental income is not a burden, it's a machine. A student loan at 3.9% behind the career that compounds earning potential over decades is not a crisis. It's an investment in an income-generating asset. Paying either of those early at the expense of investing in an environment where returns can reasonably be expected to exceed those rates is not discipline. It's math phobia dressed up as responsibility. But here is the caveat that the highlight reel financial influencers always skip. This logic assumes you will actually invest the difference, not spend it, not inflate your lifestyle, not let it dissolve into subscriptions and convenience and the slow creep of spending that rises to meet every income increase. Lifestyle creep is the silent third option nobody talks about in the invest versus payoff debt debate. Most people frame this decision as binary: invest the extra cash or kill the debt. But there's a third path that millions of Americans actually take, which is do neither. Convince themselves they deserve a bit of comfort now. Book the vacation, upgrade the car, eat out 4 times a week instead of 2. The debt stays, the investments never materialize, and 5 years later they're having the exact same internal debate, just with a higher cost of living and a deeper sense that wealth is for other kinds of people. It isn't. But it does require a specific kind of clarity about what money actually is and what it's actually for. Money is not a reward for working hard. The country is full of people who work extraordinarily hard and retire without financial security. Money is a tool that operates according to rules around interest, compounding, time, and risk. And the people who use it most effectively aren't necessarily the ones who earn the most. They're the ones who waste the least, deploy the most intentionally, and understand that every financial decision is either moving capital toward them or away from them. Let's talk about the specific scenario where this decision gets most complicated, which is the middle income trap, the zone where you earn enough that your financial problems feel solvable, but not enough that any single mistake doesn't sting. This is actually the most dangerous financial position to be in, not because the numbers are impossible, but because it creates a particular kind of psychological paralysis. You're not desperate enough to make radical changes. You're not comfortable enough to feel safe. So you do the thing that feels like action. You make the minimum payments, you put a little aside, you tell yourself you'll get serious soon, while the interest compounds and the market runs without you. Getting out of that trap requires a decision, not a calculation. The calculation only tells you what's optimal in theory. The decision is what you actually execute when the theory meets your bank account. Here is what I want you to take from this. If your debt carries interest above 7%, attacking it is not sacrifice. It is the highest returning investment in your portfolio. Do it systematically. Avalanche style, highest rate first, with the urgency of someone who understands what compound interest actually means on the other side of the ledger. If your debt sits below 6%, you are in genuine strategic territory. The decision to invest versus pay down depends on your risk tolerance, your investment timeline, your job stability, and your honest assessment of whether you will actually invest a difference or spend it. If you will invest it, and you have the emotional discipline to hold through market downturns without panic, the math generally favors letting that low-rate debt breathe while your capital compounds elsewhere. If you have both high-rate debt and low-rate debt simultaneously, which most Americans do, the answer is sequencing. High-rate debt is an emergency. Low-rate debt is a consideration. Do not treat them the same. Do not split your extra capital evenly across everything in the name of balance. Balance is a luxury for people who have already eliminated their most expensive financial obligations. And if you're sitting here with no high-interest debt and a stable income, and you've been waiting to feel ready to start investing, that feeling is never coming. The market does not wait for your confidence. Compound interest does not pause while you deliberate. The best time to have started was years ago. The second best time is a decision you can make before this video ends. There is no version of financial security that comes from watching from the sidelines and waiting for certainty. Certainty is not on the menu. What is on the menu is information, strategy, and the willingness to act with incomplete information in a system that is moving whether you're engaged with it or not. The wealthy do not know something mystical about money. They understand the rules of the game clearly enough to play offense instead of defense. They understand that debt at a cost below the return on capital is not a problem. It's a tool. They understand that high-interest debt is not a moral failing, but a financial emergency that demands triage. They understand that the question is never simply invest or pay off debt, but rather, what is the real cost of this debt? What is the realistic return on this investment? And what is the opportunity cost of choosing one over the other? You now have that framework. The only question left is what you're going to do with it.